There you go.
All right.
Okay, so just wanted to welcome everybody here. We got a reasonably good crowd for a Saturday night, and we're going to do the great unveil. We're recording it, so we will have it up on the baseball book page. After we do this, we will. So we have a countdown that David has done a very good job of a presentation of the top 20 to build suspense. And then afterwards, we'll, if people are interested and we have enough time, we'll just show the breakdown of the Excel spreadsheets with basically, all the votes, and you can ask questions, why did the books I voted for only get 3 votes, or, where did this show up? So I'm going to try and how did we do the share the screen now? That's where share screen. I want to find. There it is. Okay, so does everybody can see the 20 books with the most votes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Good.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
The countdown
Okay,
begins.
so the one complaint I have about David is there's no music with this, right? There should be like at least take me out to the ball game. So and we were trying to have, Tom and I had a ferocious debate about whether we should, reveal the top 2 or 3 or 4, because maybe that, everybody would know what they're going to be. And then we said, no, we'll leave it as suspense. So number 20, and I guess we'll announce right now that, we have 217 different people vote, which for, internet polls like this is a pretty good number. I think, Tom and I were probably hoping for 200, 500 is wildly optimistic. But, people say if you get 1 to 2% response on anything on the internet, people even reading your threads, you've done well. Only the Ball Was White. This is the reissue edition, but is probably the first and most important book on the Negro Leagues. I think 1970, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the original has the white cover with a black hand gripping a baseball, a very dramatic. Obviously, since 1970, there's been a tremendous amount of research, tremendous number of books written. But I think if you're, if you've not read anything about the Negro Leagues, it's a good place to start. And I think it's, reflected by the votes. I would have
I've
voted
got it.
higher.
I've never read it.
What's that?
Never read it?
Yeah, it's a I can't I've read it a few times, but it's like I can't remember the quality of the writing. I just remember how it affected me. I first read it when I was 11 or 12 and pulled it off the library shelf, and just totally blown away by something I'd never heard a word on, the Negro Leagues. Just I knew Jackie Robinson, and that was it. Saskatoon, Saskatchewan was not a hotbed of Negro League historians. Wow, I've got 2 books in the top 20. So Mike Sowell, is it pronounced Sowell, Tom?
Sowell, yeah, he's a member of our group too. Mike Sowell.
He is. So we always, it's always funny. Sometimes people on their posts don't realize that many of the authors are members here, especially if they don't post very often. Mike's posted a few times, but he's not one of the most prolific. But again, another book I voted for, and a book that I read, and I think a very good one. So you can now here's a book I hadn't read, Luckiest Man. The demographics and the age, there's obviously East Coast, New York, a large, and the Yankees having such a place. Tom, what I haven't read Luckiest Man. Any thoughts you have on it?
That's the best Lou Gehrig book by far.
Mm-hmm.
You mean better than Lou Gehrig, Boy of the Sandlots by
Yeah.
that you may have read in the library.
You get more Pa Gehrig in this book. They don't say too much about Pa Gehrig in the other books.
and no Gary Cooper photos either. So yeah, so I think it's a book, I kind of get, I'm not a Yankees fan, so I kind of get it takes a lot for me to read, a Mickey Mantle book or, I mean, Jane Leavy has one or this book. So I'm not, I'm going to get to Dennis's book, I promise, on Lefty O'Doul. Got to read Oscar Charlton. May get to Lou Gehrig, Luckiest Man, maybe in the next 10 years. But we'll see. Got a lot to read.
Oh.
The Baseball 100. Tom, again, you're going to have to comment on this one because before voting started, I mean, I'd sort of heard of this book in the background of my brain, but there's so much empty space in there that it really didn't have an impact on me. I'm sure you've read it. Have you?
I'm reading it right now. It starts with number 100 and works its way backwards. So right now, I read the exercise. I read a chapter a night. I ride the exercise bike. I'm up to number 60, Pete Rose.
And it's not 100, as I understand it, it's not ranking the top 100. It's sort of his pick of 100 people who have affected the game or something like that. Is that?
Oh, it's his top 100 of all time.
Oh, so he is ranking. Okay. Well, we'll leave the suspense for that one for anybody who hasn't read it.
Sanahara O's in there, Negro Leaguers. He's got a lot of different players in there.
Yeah. Okay. Roger Angell, or do you? I pronounce it Angel. This is another one where Angel or Angel.
I think it's Angel.
Okay. Well, that's another one. I'm sure somebody, Eddie Sakati, Napoli. There's a lot of names I mispronounce. So, yeah. I guess more impact if you're an Angel than a Angel. I read this, years ago. It didn't stick with me as much as the Summer Game for some reason. So again, deferring to Mr. Zacco for any editorial comment.
I read it quite a few years ago myself, but I don't remember that much about it. But I like it.
I think he's either 100 or 101. So, just who else was up there? Arnold Haino, Ray Robinson, that both passed away now. But it seems to me that maybe there's a certain longevity of writers of that era that, compared to the guys in the, 1910s and 20s who were probably a little more hard drinking and hard living than of these later guys. But now here's Jane Leavy's book. The Last Boy, another one. My first year of baseball was really sort of sneaking a radio in 1967, Boston, St. Louis, 1968, Detroit and St. Louis, and so Mickey Mantle was on his last legs, both figuratively and literally. So unlike guys 3 years older than me, 5 years older than me, they have the reverence for, not only a great ball player, but what could have been. Haven't read it. Mr. Zacco, again, you seem to be doing a lot of the editorial comment. Yeah. And I'm just I'm kind of like the Price is Right or the Wheel of Fortune host, right?
Yeah, I liked it. She was good. She traveled with him, so she gave you a lot of good information on him. I guess he made a pass at her too in the book. So it's our boy Mickey, but it's enjoyable read.
Yeah, I did go to his restaurant in New York City in 1980 something. So I didn't steal any silverware plates. Probably should have, but I was a good boy. Another one that I mean I'd heard of, hadn't read, got a lot of votes and so impressed people. And of course, Mr. Zacco has again read it. Tom, your thoughts?
That was pretty interesting. I'm not a big Marvin Miller fan, but it talks about how he fooled the owners. They played into his hands and everything else. It's an interesting read.
Yeah. There's obviously a little more topical now with the lockout, or as I got an email from the owner of the San Diego Padres, what did they call it? A work stoppage, right? This unfortunate work stoppage. Please support the Padres. So I asked to be removed from that mailing list. Shoeless Joe. I have read Shoeless Joe. A lot of people really like it, and I really liked it when it came out. I thought it was a wonderful book. I'm so impressed with Kinsella. And he certainly has maintained that a lot, obviously, by the voting here. by the Field of Dreams movie, which, is a little different than the book. There's no James Earl Jones. It's J.D. Salinger is thrown in there instead. But I think like a lot, I used to be a Kinsella completist collector, both, not only his baseball, but his, as he would describe it, his Indian books, where he wrote about First Nation, basically young First Nation kids in Alberta, and he has no First Nation background. So if you read up about a lot of Kinsella, if you read his next 25 books, they aren't a whole lot different than Shoeless Joe. There's this magical realism that he churns out again and again. He was very upfront about needing to make a living as a writer. That's why he wrote baseball and why he wrote about First Nation kids. And I'm not sure he really liked the game from, I didn't know him. I think I went to 3 readings in Vancouver where he was at, read about him, but, had a hard life afterwards in terms of personal relationships and things. So, but clearly, it's if you only read Shoeless Joe, it's not surprising it's that high. And I think Thomas, well, I can't ruin the suspense. Is that the highest fiction rated book? But we'll let our crowd wait for the countdown and to see whether Slugger of the Sandlot makes the top 5. I don't even think there's a book called Slugger of the Sandlot, but I couldn't think of another one. Halberstam, October 64. It's actually one of the books that Tom and I talked about in our dress rehearsal, and I read it. I can't remember a thing about how well it was written. I mean, he's a good writer. I remember more his book about, I remember Summer of 49 more, and I remember his book about the Portland Trailblazers, which I read, 15 years or 10 years before I read October 64. And Tom, what are your thoughts on October 64, 1964?
I thought it was okay. He talks a lot about racism. He doesn't talk a whole lot about the 64 Phillies. I wanted more about the Phillies, how they blew it. He talks more about Kurt Flood and the Cardinals, and wasn't one of his better ones, I didn't think, but a lot of voted for it.
Yeah. And here's another one that I should have read but haven't. And I knew, I didn't know, but I was glad to see, just from the perception or the things I'd heard about the book, that other members of the group were happy and well thought of. And again, not one that I've read. And Tom, you've read it. You've read pretty well all 861 books, haven't you? So your thoughts on Clemente?
What amazed me about this book is the pilot, how untrained he was, and how they overloaded the flight, how unsafe it was. It's amazing. You feel like you're in that plane with him when it goes down.
Yeah, it's I certainly remember, 19, I guess was it Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve? One of the two.
New Year's Eve.
Yeah, New Year's Eve, and just hearing that and going, man,
we love it.
What a tragedy. A book I did read many years ago, The Babe Comes to Life. So, perhaps I think probably in about the right place for that. Obviously, The Babe, a book, any book about Mickey Mantle or The Babe, if it's got a good writer, it's going to have a good effect throughout the votes. And I'm always impressed about, I think, when did this book come out? About 74-ish?
Sometime in the 70s.
Sometime in the 70s. Now when I'm researching baseball and things, we all go on the internet. We have, we can find newspaper articles instantly. We can find, many, many things. And just the difficulty of, and the extra effort it went to researching. I mean, obviously people have found a lot more about the Babe, in the last 40 years. But again, I thought it was a good book when I read it, but, so long ago. Another one where David C. Garcia got the dust jacket, or I don't even know if it was a dust jacket or the cover for the newer edition of Roger Angell, as I will now correctly pronounce it for the rest of my life until I make the mistake again. And I like this book. I read it a number of years ago. It's one of these books, as I say, I remember enjoying reading it And I think that was 1972, if I'm not mistaken. Here's a couple of guys I don't recognize. Looks like Vern Stevens and Gene Woodling, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I read Summer 49. I don't even know if I finished October 64. Is sort of, my attention span is half that of a squirrel. So, but I like Summer 49. Was there any talk? One of the things I remember at Williams and DiMaggio, there's that almost trade for each other. Was that about that time, or was it earlier? Or anybody know? I don't know.
It was earlier, I think.
Yeah. And Summer 49, they were both getting up there. Well, certainly DiMaggio. I think what it was last year was 51, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
last year, Mantle's first.
Yeah. Lefty's Legacy. Geez, I don't even know if I have this book, but even if I do, I haven't read it.
I don't know.
Obviously very well thought of. It's another one where it'd be interesting if we had the demographics of the baseball book group, and it probably skews pretty old, and it probably skews where a lot of people were 10, 11, or 12 in 1964, 65, 66, when Sandy was at his peak. And obviously that doesn't make a book great, but if you've got a good writer writing it, it certainly puts it up there. I guess from that perspective, I haven't read it, so what distinguishes that from Last Boy? I don't know, Tom, if you have any thoughts as to the difference of her inner books. Or
she interviewed him. He came out with a few things. He said, as long as you don't talk about my marriages, I'll talk about
it. Yeah. I mean, certainly, it's interesting because until you mentioned that there, I'd never thought of his marriages, or even if he was married or whatever. Whereas, Mickey Mantle, we all know about everything, and Lou Gehrig we know, and Babe Ruth we know, and Sandy has been obviously very private and very distinguished in his career. Michael Lewis, the push of the analytical supporters into number 6. I thought it was a good book. Obviously, a lot of big press edition and big exposure. So Tom, your thoughts on how it ranks up there with other analytical books?
It's about the best one. I voted for.
Yeah, I didn't vote for him because I knew everybody else would, so I was just being a contrarian. And my friend Kit Krieger, who runs, or I think he probably will now post-pandemic, but ran baseball tours to Cuba to watch baseball games. Michael Lewis went down on one of those tours, and I will leave Kit Krieger to tell the rest. But it had no impact on my voting, I don't think. I hadn't read the book, so I wasn't going to vote it. I can't believe David Garcia found a cover I've never seen before, but it's got a new forward by Bob Verdi. I read this book many years ago, but I voted for it because I had, what kept with me was sort of the irreverence of Veeck compared to the other owners. And I think, Tom, that was probably your sense, but I think you said you were a little surprised it came in that high.
I liked it. I was surprised a lot of other people liked it, but he was quite an owner. He was a interesting person, did a lot of interesting things, midgets and everything else.
I just can't believe there hasn't been a biography of Eddie Goodell. So, who had a very tragic, I think he got mugged on the street and died quite young, like 40 something. So,
hey guys, two comments real quick. So I'm always conflicted on which version of a book to get, because I like the original. The first editions are always fun to look at, but of course the newer ones have additional stuff often thrown in. So that's what amused me about this cover. The second thing is I felt like after reading this that I should amputate my leg, and I don't even smoke, but put a little ashtray, build it into my prosthetic. So that's what this book makes me think about every time I read it.
it's certainly, you know, that's an excellent point, because it did really convey that aspect of his personality, not just the irreverence, but, you know, sort of the physical manifestation of that, the prosthetic leg, the smoking, the, you know, everything of that. So, you know, you mentioned first editions. He signed a number of copies, right? Both Veeck's in Wreck and Hustler's Handbook. But it's still, you know, I have it, my signed copy, and it's, you know, something I really like and keep. But, you know, I'm kind of weird because I'm a first edition collector. So, you know, I go for, you know, there's a few of us hanging around that are allowed into the baseball books ones. And new Bill James historical baseball abstract.
Yes.
We got a gift from Zoom, so our 40-minute limit was extended. Obviously, they want me to sign up for premium with their beneficence. When the votes started to come in, we had people voting for the Bill James historical baseball abstract and the new Bill James historical abstract. So David and Tom and I, you know, we had many meetings, hours of discussions, proxy votes, all these things, and we just decided to combine them because even though it says completely revised, how completely revised is it, Tom? I haven't read the new one. I read the old one.
I have the old one. I don't have the new one either.
Yeah. So
I think it's about 80%.
Yeah,
80% new.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
then there's truth on the cover, and maybe we should have kept them as two separate. You know, a few people voted for things like the Bill James abstracts, you know, 83 or 82 to 88 or 89 or what it is, and we had to send out stern letters. You know, your membership can be revoked unless you pick a year. You know, they voted for the Norman Mock, you know, the trilogy, and you know, we made a decision just to say, you know, you gotta vote for one book. So maybe we should have split James into two books, given the degree of revision. But since neither Tom and I have read the new one, I think David Garcia pulled a fast one over on us to combine it, because it was probably on his ballot. It wasn't on mine. Was it on yours, Tom?
No.
No,
It was on my ballot.
No, I really like the first one. I didn't read the second one, you know, so
that should be what we should put this up for the next vote. Let people pick from their favorite of 46 different versions of this book here.
Well, you know, it's interesting how, you know, some authors got a number of votes, you know, had a different vote. You know, they never made the top 20, but still received different votes for their different. They didn't have a book that, you know, stuck out. And you know, you can see with 216 voters. Yeah. You know, we're getting into the top 3, and I don't think there's going to be real surprises. Maybe number 3, the Boys of Summer again. You know, the extensive population in Brooklyn, and you know, the just when it came out, and the you know, the pull it had on, you know, Brooklyn, you know, being spirited away to Los Angeles. I'm not surprised it's number 3. You know, I read it as a kid. I really liked it as a kid, but I kind of, you know, I probably should have reread it if I was not going to vote for it, and I didn't vote for it because I knew everybody else would. But you know, David, are your percentages right? If 83 votes and there's 216 voters, that's more than 8.2.
The 83, the percentage is of the total vote. So 83 divided by, oh my gosh.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay.
8% of 8.2% of voters voted for this book, and that was 83 whatever, you know, the votes out of the total.
Yeah, so it's a little misleading, but what's an election without controversy?
Right. I'm showing 2 different kinds of, one is of the voters and one is the votes.
Right. So anybody who you know, can take off their gloves and their socks, and you know, can divide 83 by 216, which is about you know, whatever it is, you know, 38% or something. Yeah, I did that in my head, and it's clearly impressive for a lawyer. Number 2, again, I did vote for this book, just like almost half the people did, and 10.4 of the total votes. Obviously there's been, some debate. Did he really write, or, he just dictated into a tape recorder, and, Leonard Schechter edited it all and things like that. I read it when it came out, I don't think there's any problem me finding it in the library when 1960, so it came out in 70, I think. So, it certainly didn't get censored in our library or anything, probably because nobody read any baseball books. But I didn't find it, even as a sort of a 12-year-old. Maybe I was very worldly in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, but it certainly didn't strike me then as being, oh my God, this is so revolutionary. And certainly now it kind of almost seems tame in comparison. But I think that's because I didn't have any perspective of, when I was 12, I hadn't read, Fred Lieb or Frank Graham, or any sort of the sanitized biographies or histories, or how things were written before. So Tom, I mean, you're a tad older. How did you perceive it when it came out? I think you said you're in, was it Southeast Asia at the time? How did the market there react?
I was home by now. I was going to Yankee Stadium. I stopped in a bookstore. They just got it that day. I read about it, so I was all excited. When I had Jim Bouton autograph years later, he said, "That's the first edition, right?" He says, "Only 5,000 of those."
Oh, well, you and I have 2 of them then. Yeah.
But they were writing about that book for quite a while before it came out, so I couldn't wait. I just happened to walk in the store, and they just got it that day. So I've read it several times.
Yeah, I have too. It's one of the few I have. I mean, I probably haven't read it for 4 or 5 years, but I probably read it 4 or 5 times over the last number of years. And it's an easy read, right? It's not difficult. It's very accessible, and I think it does take us into his trials and tribulations. I'm not sure if how a real Yankee fan, there was sort of how did you're saying that Mickey Mantle drank and did all this and cavorted. I don't know how guys who were Yankee fans that might have been sort of 20 when this book came out, how they view it now many years later. As I said, I think I'm not surprised it's number 2. I suspect no one else is. And drum roll for number 1, a shocker. A shocker. It's there's obviously the only book that made over 50% of that, over 50% of the voters. So actually, it's not 11.6% of voters, it's 11.6% of votes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to correct that when we post this. So again, one of my regrets in life is I corresponded a bit with Larry, and wrote him a few letters, and he sent a couple things back, or emailed him a couple times, and he never wrote me a letter back. But one of these things where, why didn't I talk to him? Why didn't I pick up the phone and say, hey, you talk to Sam Crawford, you talk to Chief Bender, you talk to all these guys, Davy Jones. What was it like? And certainly groundbreaking. It's been not imitated, it's been replicated by many authors since. A number of them got some reasonably high number of votes in the poll. We played the game. I think I've not read that one, but I think it showed up pretty well, Tom. And to me, it's funny, I haven't gone back and read the book in at least the last 10 years, but when I would drive down to Seattle for from Vancouver to go see the Mariners play, I'd put on the CDs and just listen to Sam Crawford. How'd you find me I think you found Sam at the laundromat or something. And and just to hear the guys' voices, and you think back to now as you get older, and that's 110 years ago that those guys were in their prime. It's it says when Larry was doing these interviews, it's as long from him doing the interviews as as he was going back. So you can just imagine, now you're finding guys who played in the late 50s and 60s. Oh yeah, a lot of them are passed away or things like that, but nobody thinks anything of doing an interview of them or finding them. I mean, there may be guys you can't find or things like that, but he was certainly groundbreaking. So so that's there. So charts and graphs, look at that. I can't actually see it because I've got my reading glasses on, but there's the results. And it's very impressive coloring. I know David worked hard on it. It's beautiful. So there it is. There's the top three again. And there they all are in their glory. Now, the next thing, okay, so we'll just, I think we go through, so David has highlighted some of the ones just outside of the top 20. I think he got tired of clipping screenshots from the internet and on top of working, 12 to 14 hours at his regular job where, Tom and I would just, bug him with messages all day. And so 8 men out, 25 votes. The long season, which was sort of the was viewed a little bit similarly as Ball Forbes, sort of the first realistic. Brosnan's obviously a much more accomplished writer as a writer than Bouton was. He did his own writing and did that. Now, has he passed away, Tom, or is he?
Jim Brosnan passed away a number of years ago.
Yeah. Just another one. The teammates, another Halberstam. I read it. I liked it. I can't remember. 9 innings. I haven't read it. Tom, you I think, did you just read it now when the ballots started coming in?
I saw the boss was getting it, but I had to take it off the shelf and read it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Talks about inning by inning, what goes on during a game, and it's about the Brewers.
These are the next one, Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty. It's one of these ones, I don't even think I own it. And like, I'm kind of ashamed to admit I don't own it and haven't read it, and have actually read both Al Stump books. Right. And but I've been on enough Ty Cobb forums and emails and things. I mean, I do need to read it. I think it's one of the important books to put, our green penned forger into context. Wait until next year. I read it. I can't remember it. Doris, anything to add to that? Another New York.
What's Kern's good one?
Yeah.
I was a Dodger fan as a kid. She got to be a Red Sox fan after she moved away, which kind of disappointed me, but it's an interesting book.
Yeah. Crazy 08, a book I'd heard of, haven't read, but got a surprising number of, not a surprising number of votes. I was surprised, but I'm easily surprised by a lot of things. And Tom, you've read it before? Or?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It ends up with a Merkle boner and everything else. It's there's a book about that season.
Yeah. No, and there's I was George Fleming's or G.H. Fleming's book, was that about 1908 too?
Yeah, The Unforgettable Season.
But he had basically just sort of taken newspaper articles and sort of put them into chronology. DiMaggio, The Hero's Life, is sitting on my bookshelf unread. So I think there's a lot of DiMaggio fans. There's been sort of maybe some negative reaction to the detail and things, but biographies aren't supposed to be sanitized. They're supposed to be, this is what the guy was. And I think too often with our heroes, we put up a false narrative, and that's what we choose to believe because we believed it when we were 10 or 12 or 15, right? The next book,
large ego.
Sorry?
He had a large ego, very large ego.
Yeah, and he made bad coffee with his machine. So. I was too young to drink coffee then, or I didn't like it back then. But I'd pick up one if it. Does anybody know? Did his machine have like his endorsement on it or any identification? It was just called Mr. Coffee, wasn't it? Or the machine, or I can't remember.
I don't know.
We'll leave that for the baseball memorabilia voting. Top 20 bits of 1970s memorabilia. The Universal Baseball Association, I guess that'd be our second highest fiction, wouldn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. That, when I read it, was a very scary book because basically I only did 3 things in high school and probably the first year of university, and none of them involved girls. I played basketball. I can't remember what the second thing was. Had a bad memory. And I played a ton of Stratomatic baseball, you know, writing down stats in hand. You know, I had one friend I played with a fair bit. You know, we did home run baseball where we draft Steve Blass as the guy who would pitch to us. And then we draft, you know, Ted Williams and Roger Hornsby and Babe Ruth for our team. And, you know, the games would end up 23-22 and things like that. We played seasons, but I played a lot of solitaire Stratomatic. And then when you read Cougar, it kind of gives you a bit of the shakes. Like, what are you going to do with your life? How does it affect you? When does, you know, if you talk about a fantasy world of baseball, it's a much more powerful and difficult thing to assess than I think Shoeless Joe. And I think that's why it's certainly received, you know, from the literary critics, who of course are not members of the baseball book group, except for Tom and me. You know, it receives that. Fall Spring, Reddit, Celebrant Reddit, Catcher was a Spy Reddit. Now, I rated Fall Spring, but I get it confused with his other book, Tom, and his other book was Suitors of
Spring. Yes.
Suitors of Spring. Yeah.
And I just, you know, again, I should have gone back to my book and sort of at least professed a degree of what I can remember of the book, but I don't. I thought Catcher was a Spy was, you know, when I read it, you know, I read what the Kaufman et al. Book on Mo Berg, you know, scholar, athlete, movie star, you know, whatever it was. And, you know, I like Catcher was a Spy. I mean, Tom, is there any sense that you have, having a memory which can actually remember what you read, how his book, how either of them hold up from sort of a accuracy perspective, a literary perspective?
I was surprised. I thought he just went and taught at Princeton. I didn't realize what an oddball he was kind of out there. He just disappeared a lot, and
Yeah.
And then knew he was going to show up.
Celebrant, I think, you know, it's, you know, I read it, but it's, you know, certainly unlike Cougar, it did not stick with me, you know, but it, you know, a lot of people have put it as, you know, their #1 fiction book. Are we down to white pages? I think we're done there for that. Okay. Now we got a couple chat messages, and Scott says Posnanski is my first top 20 mention, and Tom Zacco says yes to some question. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to share screen, and I'm going to, I think I closed this one out right, and I'm going to find, hopefully I don't show any of my, you may see some, I'm going to go to baseball book votes and open that. And what we're going to do is, you know, after this, we're going to release the sort of the votes, you know, in sequential order. So I screen down, and is that up for everybody?
No.
No. What am I screen sharing? Why is it not up?
Microsoft Edge has been updated. That's what-
Okay.
That's your, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is that okay, let me close. Okay, baseball book close. I'm just going to close everything else out. PowerPoint presentation and go close out. PowerPoint, Facebook close out. Post attendee Zoom. I don't think I want to get rid of that because that may get rid of me. So it's not showing. What's showing up? Is it still Microsoft Edge?
Yes.
Yeah, it has been updated.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Yeah, because I think when in Google, it opens up in Google, and anyway, well, then you're going to have to watch Microsoft Edge for a bit. Because I mean, let me just go back to it and I'll tell you what's there, and you'll be able to see it in a few minutes when we post it. So what we have is every book, so we just list them in, we've rearranged them in voting, number of votes received. So Glory of the Times with 118, total number of books 1,013. So that's the number of books that received individual votes. And if you think, 216 people voted, everyone is naming on average, like some people obviously named more than 5 books that were different, but there's an incredible variety of books that received it. And I think, what hopefully makes this list a little different, maybe a little more of assistance to our group is that, it wasn't just Joe Posnanski writing down, or Mike Shannon, or Jeff Passan, or some insider saying, here's what you should consider the baseball books because I have expertise and I'm going to tell you what my choices are, and it would influence yours. We tried to leave it as open as possible. We got a number of questions where people would go, well, what's the criteria? And I'd go, whatever you want it to be. And some people said, well, I haven't read that many books. And I was going to say, you don't even have to have read them to vote for them. But Tom said, you should really only vote for the books you read, for he's such a spoil sport. I mean, I think maybe that gives it a little, there were some guys who I remember one ballot listed a lot of the boys' fiction, Friendlick and Joe Archibald and all these ones. They had a big impact on that voter. And, more so than, Sandy Koufax, Lefty's Legacy, which has a bigger impact on sort of our understanding of the greats of the game. But, I'm a huge fiction collector. I've got, a lot of, juvenile books and adult fiction and things like that in the baseball world. And one of the things, particularly as work stoppages continue and things like that, and we have all the disconnect in the modern game, I almost go back and I like the non-star players. I'm certainly out of touch with the majority who read, Sandy Koufax and the Boys of Summer and, Babe and Clemente, things like that. But, I don't mind. And I like, sort of the guys who, had it really tough or had tragedy in their life. So because I can't do the screen, I'm just going to run through some of the other ones. And as I say, you'll be able to see this when we finished. A well-paid slave was how many? We start at row 9, so I subtract 9 from it. A well-paid slave was up there in about 16 votes. So when it's 16 or 17, there's quite a number, and you can fall down. The natural 18 votes. I thought it received more, but I think the movie clearly very different than the book. Bill James, Whatever Happened to the Hall of Fame, another one where we had to combine. I guess the first one was Politics of Glory, so James got a bit more. Shropshire, nobody I'd ever. I'm sorry, I hadn't read any of his books before. Barely heard his name, but again received a number of votes for his different books and things like so something that I think when people look at that, they go, hey, I may pull him off the shelf. The Baseball Encyclopedia 1969 by Macmillan, one I didn't vote for, but I want to go back and change my ballot because I remember I was just telling Tom in our pre-chat, pulling it up, finding it in the library at in grade 9, and just opening it up and seeing looking at Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and seeing all the bold when they were league leaders and putting their stats into a historical career context was just fascinating. And then all these other guys I'd never heard of, finding Jeff Heath and 20 triples in a year in whatever it was, 1941 or something like that. So just amazing. A Day in the Bleachers, Arnold Hano or Hano, Tom? You still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Hano or Hano?
You know,
Hano, yeah, okay. Another one I got wrong. You know me, L got a number of votes. That's one of my favorites, but again, maybe a little like sort of a guy who repeated the style in a number of his writings and didn't really stretch himself. So there are, when we look at the stats, and as I say, you'll have the link up shortly. 216 voters. So again, Ward Clough wins the prize of the book, which I haven't decided, but I'll send him or I'll post a note to get his address and send it out to him. It'll be a nice book, like Kami or something. So thanks to those who did guess. A number of people guessed like 942 and 837. After I corrected the first couple people and I said, no, not the total number of books receiving votes, the total number of voters. That's what it says there. And as 3 or 4 kept in, I said, well, this is supposed to be a reasonably literate group. If guys can't read, the direct question I'm posting for the guests, I'm not going to correct them. So my apologies to anybody who guessed like 843, or maybe they did think we'd have 843 and they just never read any of my posts and just wanted to annoy me. So books with only one vote, I think we mentioned it, 589. So more than half of the books, the total number of books mentioned only got one vote again, which I think I think Tom and I find that as a very, a good sign of the diversity of our group, despite, a heavy East Coast influence in the voting. 86 fiction. I thought it might have been a bit higher, but the actual, I'm not sure if we have the number of votes that were received by fiction books. A lot of them just received one, and some of them are from my ballot, no doubt. But baseball fiction is there, but I think it pales in comparison to that. So I think that's where, as I said, my apologies, I can't get the voting spreadsheet on there, but what we're going to do is we're going to post it. And what can happen is if you want to make your ballot public, what you do is you will just have a thread and you can say, make my ballot public, and then we will release it. We will ensure that, there aren't any snippy comments about, gee, Tom or Max, why did you vote for that? I'll make my ballot public because I think it's always fun to poke fun at the admin. I don't know if Tom will do his, but he's can certainly do it. But and we're pretty good at I think in this group, we don't if somebody puts a stupid comment or something really off base, we don't ask questions. We don't post it publicly. It's deleted. So the only time you'll see it is if Tom and I don't see it for because we're doing something else. But we don't ask for an explanation or just and we've deleted many whole threads where they've gone off, and I think that hopefully gives a better tone to the group overall. And I hope I think that's what most people appreciate. So I guess what we can do is if anybody has there's 3 more chats, people saying don't quit your day job. Those 2 years in theater didn't help you with public speaking. No, those aren't there. That's just my inner thoughts coming out. If anybody wants to, as I say, I mistakenly muted everybody. So if you want to ask a question, and you're muted and you somehow can't unmute yourself, just send a note in chat and I'll try and unmute you if I'm there. So we'll just give and anybody who I have unmuted, if you guys have any questions, just or criticism, comments, concerns, as I said, we'll have that spreadsheet up and it'll generate a lot. So the chat messages have not poured in. I don't even know how many people are online still, Tom. I can't. There's
16.
That's not bad. Yeah, I thought there'd be 16 to 20. it's Saturday night. The baseball book members are really high flying living people. So it's really, really amazing that anybody isn't out at the restaurant or the club or the disco, so, or reading a book and ignoring us. Right. So, okay, so I'll just wrap it up there. If anybody else wants to, as I say, either ask a question here. Tom, do you have anything else to add, or David?
No, I'm okay here.
Okay, so I will stop the share, so you'll no longer see Microsoft Edge. And what we'll do is, there's Kit Krieger.
Joshua Roth.
Or I think Kit is muted, but I'm trying to unmute him if I can, because he's asked to unmute. I don't know how to do this. It's really. Now, sorry, Kit. Oh, there you are. I did mention.
Sorry, I'm late. What did I win?
You won nothing.
Excellent. That's the third time in a row this week. Excellent.
Kit has one of the highest.
Sleep over this.
And before he tells it, Kit has a 3.00 earned run average in the Pacific Coast League. So probably the best pitching record of any member of the baseball book group. And I did mention, Kit, I don't know if you were on because I just joined. I'm in Victoria, so I'm 35 years behind your time zone. Yeah, the newlywed and the nearly dead, for those who don't know Victoria, British Columbia. One of the things that maybe just people are interested in, Moneyball was number 5, and I had mentioned that Michael Lewis had gone on one of your Cuba ball tours. And I didn't want to put any words in your mouth. I just said, at some point, talk to Kit. And I don't know if there's anything you can add to the group, recognizing that this is being recorded and will be posted live.
No, Michael Lewis didn't go on a Cuba ball tour with me, but I got a call from Rob Nyer, who told me that he was going to Cuba or wanted to do a book on the business side of Cuban baseball. And after a discussion, I said, you can't do that. They won't let you, but come with me. I'll take you, and really wanted to create a job for a friend of mine in Cuba who needed to work. So I spent a week with him, of 2 weeks he spent in Cuba, and he did a piece in Vanity Fair called Moneyball, unfortunate title. And people have praised the writing. I was not happy with a number of the comments made, which were in error. We talked about defectors' records being stricken with the Cuban record book, which was untrue. Anyway, it got me in a lot of trouble. It took me about 3 years to repair relationships which were tarnished by his really, I guess, disregard for the rules that I'd set for the visit. But anyway, it's I like his stuff generally. It's the only thing I really know about that he wrote about, and I wasn't impressed with that, but other things he's written, I think he's a great writer.
Yeah, and I like Moneyball. I just, as I said, it's one of the ones where, I knew a lot of, it came in number 5, if you didn't notice, or if you didn't see, and I knew there was some Cuba connection, and of course, like the admin, as an admin, I'm allowed to make errors and not be held accountable for them. So thanks for correcting that. Again, Tom, David, anything else that you guys want to add, or anybody else have any comments? If I can unmute anybody else. Okay, so what we're going to do is Iggy Pop Rocks, who I know your name from voting, but he sent a chat. Sorry, he missed it. So for the guys who just turned in late, Kit and Iggy, and I don't think Deb was on originally, or maybe Joshua too. We're going to post this when I can, stop recording, and then I load it up to Facebook, or I'll probably may even have to load it up to YouTube. I don't know if we can load up Zoom meetings to Facebook, or may have to have a link. It's not as easy as Facebook Live, where you just finish it and then hit upload. But I didn't think we could have. Maybe we could on Facebook Live have a number of people. It's just easier with Zoom. And then we'll also publish the spreadsheet, which has all the votes. And then again, if you want to make your vote public, your ballot public, and and suffer ridicule like I will, or praise as most of you will in comparison to my ballot. You'll do that, and then we'll go from there, and we'll let Ward know that he won the draw for Price of Right rules. He would have lost because he was won over, but it wasn't Price of Right rules. Now, David raised his hand. I don't know what that means in Zoom world, but
That means I'm politely trying to say, hey, I wanted to say something real quick. Before
Yeah.
it does. That's what that means. And so you responded properly. That's awesome. More than anything, I was just going to say, hey, thank you for letting me be a part of this. It was fun to help you both. Certainly, if we do something like this again, I hope you'll still have me around. And then secondly, I will correct the percentages. My brain was in a different space, and I didn't handle the percentages the way I should on the spreadsheet. So I'll correct that before we send it out.
yeah. Okay, guys. So I'll stop recording here unless anybody else has anything else. I now know something else for Zoom that I thought maybe that hand meant, don't bother me, I'm sleeping. But I'll be a better admin next Zoom call if we have one. So any last thoughts, any last words? Tom, we'll sign off here, and we'll just get it posted. Okay.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.